Hello. Today I wanted to talk about something that I've done to my Zastava that can be done to most Tokarevs. Uh, I found that I was not getting the accuracy that I wanted out of this new Zastava. Not necessarily a failing of the firearm, just not up to what I wanted. There were a few things that I felt were an issue. There was some grit in the trigger pull. It was a little stuttery, things like that. And so I started looking around to see what have people been doing with these, because they've been around for 100 years. Someone must have somewheres been accurizing them or doing something. I found very little information, very little. Part of that is probably due to the fact of where these were, how they were used, who was allowed to own them, etc. I'm not really sure. I know here in our country, the 1911 was king because a lot of people, they modified them, and all sorts of crazy stuff was done to them. So I started looking around to find what I could to make this a better firearm. I'm always looking for how can I make this better. And what I found was there was a gentleman who did a little bit of work on his. It was an article he wrote, and he posted pictures and went through the step-by-step process. I'm going to link that down below. And once again, I'm not telling anyone to do this. These kind of things probably should be done by a gunsmith. I felt very confident in doing it myself. I'm not going to tell you to do it because I don't want anyone to ruin a gun. But I will show you some of what I did. I'm not going to take apart, the hammer group and things like that, but I will show you some of the other things that I did. It's all stuff that can be done at home with a steady hand and a really fine stone. Most of the work that I did was smoothing, because that's really the key, is having not having friction surfaces, not having a lot of grading, not having a lot of things interrupting each other. So if it's smoother, it's going to travel better. So I had some very fine stones that I used for really fine edge sharpening and things like that, and I used them and just took my time. So I'm just going to show you real quickly some of the things I did there. Number one was I took the top of the rails here that the slide runs on, and I smoothed those down. You can see a little bit of it. You don't want to take off too much, because anytime you take off too much, you can't put it back. And you'd be shocked at how just a little bit of change will make a huge difference. So I took those off. The next thing I did, and I don't know if I would recommend doing this on a military surplus one or a collectible, but it's definitely worth doing. There's a small piece of metal sitting right here, and it has a little swale that meets into the trigger loop. That's why there's this little cut in the trigger loop. And what that does is, when there's no magazine in the firearm, that locks this trigger up so that it can't be done. Now, one of the problems that I have with that is it means in order to decock the firearm, you have to make sure that there's a magazine there. I don't like that. The other thing it does is it scars up the sides of your magazines. You can see there's lines here from that where it holds it in. And the third thing that happens, especially on ones that are really tight, is when you go to drop the magazine out, it won't just fall out, because that interrupter is catching it and making it out. Now, the other problem is when the magazine is in, that interrupter is pushed up and it slides along the side of the trigger loop slightly. Not a lot, but enough that you can feel it. So all I did to take that out was I literally snapped it off and then made sure it was smooth, clean, not sticking out anywhere. Just took it right off. It's not necessary. So that really helped. Like I said, the fact that I can now, set the hammer down, close firearm, everything, without having to have a magazine in it. For me, I like that better, because that means I don't have to put a magazine in a firearm, when I'm handling it. So that was something I did. The next thing that I did was I took out the spring here that the trigger pushes against. Okay, it sits in the frame like this, and the trigger pushes it back, and then everything goes off. So this is what supplies your resistance to your trigger. Straightened it just a little bit. Doesn't take much. I didn't want this to be extremely soft, because I just didn't. So I just straightened it just a little bit. You can really soften these if you want to. I don't necessarily recommend that. So that gave me a little bit less resistance on this. Then I took, and you can absolutely see it here on the side of the trigger loop, I definitely smoothed that out a lot. And I checked back here to make sure everything was square, make sure the notch was good, there was no burrs or anything, and that also helped. Moving on from there, I smoothed the slide here, and once again, very, very slowly with a nice, really fine oil stone. Try to clean up some of the spots. I've seen where guys have taken emery paper and very small screwdrivers and gotten into the cuts here and cleaned those out. I didn't go that far because I just wanted to see what I could get away with just doing a little bit. So I did that. The other thing I did was I took apart my hammer group, checked all the sears, make sure they were all flat. Anything that's going to meet with anything, I wanted clean. I wanted it straight. I didn't have to do much there. And once again, when you're fooling around with the mechanics of your hammer group, you really don't want to take much off because a little bit can be a whole lot. So I'm not going to take that apart and show you because I don't want to. But it doesn't take much to go in there and make sure all those edges are nice and crisp so that everything works smoothly. There was one other step that I didn't see him do, but I've been tempted to do, and that was to take out the firing pin, make sure everything in there is clean and neat. Now, the reason I did not do that on this specific model, as you can see, there is a safety installed here, and there's a tiny little detent ball in there, and basically, in order to get at the firing pin on this model, I have to take that safety apart, and I do not want to do that. I don't want to risk losing it and all that. And there's really no issues in that firing pin. It's not dirty. It doesn't really hang up. Maybe I could do a little work on that, but I don't feel it was necessary. If you have one of the older models that doesn't have a safety involved here, it's much easier to take apart. You just put some pressure on it, and it you can back it right out. The other thing that I may do in the future is replace the barrel bushing. That's the part that goes here that holds the barrel and the recoil spring and everything together. They make a compensator that fits in there, slotted on the top. I've seen some videos and read some things where it does make some difference. It may make quite a bit. It may make none. I don't know. The reason I have not put one on this is that the newly manufactured Zastava barrels are actually thicker than the old ones. So the compensators are made to fit around the older Tokarev barrels. So you have two choices. You either swap out this brand new barrel for an older Tokarev one that's in good condition, with a good link here, or you have to mill out the compensator bushing. Neither of which I felt like doing yet. I may fool with that. I may not. But I will tell you that having the magazines come out easier now without that interrupter, having a smoother trigger, making sure everything is crisp, making sure the rails are a little bit smoother, it didn't take much. And it's probably never going to be as smooth as my old M57 that's 100 years old. But it's nice. And what I can tell you is it took it from a firearm that was, accurate for your average Slavic soldier in a trench, to something that at 8 yards, all the rounds go here. All of them would fit inside a chew can. So I was pretty impressed with that. And that was right off the bat. I did all that work, and then the next day we went to the range, and cold, no practice, no warm-up. I took it out, took 2 magazines, and they all were within, say a 2 or 3, well, that's probably 3-inch group, which was very impressive to me from a gun that I had difficulty, keeping it centered. So those few small things may be all you need if you're having issues with this shooting properly. I did not replace the captive spring. Some people say you put in a stiffer one or you put in a softer one. I don't think it's necessary to switch that out. And it's just a very small thing, very light work that I had to do. And once again, I will link the article that I read that inspired this down below. And a little bit of work really made this a much more accurate firearm, and it made me very happy. if there's anything that you guys out there are doing to these that are making them better, if you've seen these used in match and competition, I'd love to hear about it, because here in the States, these still aren't that popular. Um, but there's so many of them out there, and they're affordable. Why someone hasn't started, fooling with them to see what they can do, I don't know. If you guys have done stuff to them, or if you've seen it done, or any stories like that, please leave in the comments. I'd love to hear about it.